I often wonder what I might have missed, what signs I overlooked along the way. There were things, small things, that I should have noticed. But at the time, I was too comfortable in my routine, too content with what I thought was a steady, predictable life. I've lived in Washington my whole life. It's a quiet place, peaceful, simple. The streets aren't crowded, and the air smells like pine and earth. It's the kind of town where people grow up, get married, and never leave. There's something reassuring about that, something I took for granted. My name is Ethan. I'm in my early 40s now, and I spent most of my adult life working with my hands. First as an apprentice at a local garage, and then taking over my own shop. I fix cars, trucks, anything with an engine. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. The money isn't great, but it's enough to live on. And I've never been one to crave the finer things in life. Sarah and I have been together since high school. She was the kind of girl who everyone noticed, the kind that turned heads without even trying. Tall, with curves that caught the eye, and eyes that sparkled like they held some kind of secret. She had this way of drawing people in, of making them feel seen and heard. I was captivated by her the moment we met, and over the years, she became the center of my world. Her touch, her laughter, the way she'd rest her head on my chest at night. Those small moments used to mean everything to me. We didn't have children. We tried, but it never happened. At first, it was something we talked about, our plans for the future, the house full of kids we imagined. But over time, it became clear that it just wasn't meant to be. I used to think about it sometimes, but mostly, I pushed it out of my mind. It wasn't something I was going to let define us. Our life was comfortable, not exciting, but steady. I spent my days at the shop, working on cars, talking with the regulars. Sarah worked as a receptionist at the local doctor's office. It wasn't an exciting job, but it paid the bills. She worked her hours, came home, and we'd have dinner together, just the two of us. We'd watch TV or talk about our day, and then go to bed. Nothing spectacular, but it was ours. For years, that routine was enough for me. I never questioned it. But somewhere along the way, Sarah started to change. It wasn't immediate, at least not at first. It crept in slowly, like a fog rolling in over a quiet morning. I remember the first time I noticed it. She started staying late at work, saying there were extra things she had to do. I didn't think much of it. After all, she was a receptionist. Sometimes there were errands to run, patients to schedule. It seemed harmless, nothing to be concerned about. But then it became more frequent. She'd come home later and later, looking tired, but also different. There was a shift in the way she carried herself, in the way she looked at me. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was something else, something I couldn't quite place. And that's when I started to notice the small changes. She'd look at me, her gaze soft, almost distant. When she used to greet me at the door, there was a warmth to her embrace, a longing that spoke of intimacy and comfort. Now, it was a polite hug, a kiss on the cheek, and then she'd slip away, retreating to the couch or her room. The intimacy we once shared seemed to fade, replaced by silence, by the absence of touch. There were nights when I'd lie awake, watching her sleep beside me. She seemed so peaceful, but there was an emptiness in her that I couldn't ignore. I remember running my fingers through her hair, hoping to feel the connection we once had. But her body felt like it belonged to someone else. Her warmth was there, but it didn't reach me the way it used to. There were no grand fights, no harsh words. Just this growing gulf between us, a space I couldn't bridge. I tried to close it, to reach out, but she'd pull away. The nights when we used to hold each other, tangled together in the sheets, felt like they belonged to someone else's life. The change was subtle at first, but eventually, it became too much to ignore. Her body, once so responsive to mine, seemed to retreat. The kisses that once sparked fire between us were now soft, distracted, almost perfunctory. She'd turn her head when I leaned in for a kiss, brushing past me as if it were just another gesture, another task. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her to come home. It was late, later than usual. I knew she had finished her shift hours ago. My mind wandered back to a conversation we'd had weeks before, a conversation about taking a vacation, doing something spontaneous, anything to break the monotony. But Sarah had smiled, that tired, distant smile, and told me that maybe next time. When she walked through the door that night, I saw it in her eyes before she even spoke. There was something different about her, something I couldn't place. She was still beautiful, still my wife, but there was a vacancy in her that didn't belong. She kissed me, quick and fleeting, like she was going through the motions. And then she took off her coat, walked past me without a word, and went to her room. I could feel the weight of it all then, the unspoken words between us. I sat there, in the silence, trying to convince myself that it was just a phase, that it would pass. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew that something, somehow, had already shifted. It was as if the bond we'd once shared had begun to unravel, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stitch it back together. I should have said something then, but I didn't. I should have confronted her, asked her what was wrong. Instead, I let the quiet consume us. I let the distance grow. The affection I used to get so freely from her became a distant memory, and I found myself longing for the touch that once filled my life with warmth. But it was gone. And I, in my quiet desperation, started to wonder if I'd ever get it back. It started so quietly, like a breeze that you don't feel until it's already swept away your breath. I didn't want to believe what my instincts were telling me. I didn't want to admit that the woman I'd spent nearly half my life with was slipping through my fingers. But the signs were all there. It wasn't just in the way she spoke to me or the way she looked at me. No, it was in the way she stopped being present when she was with me. I saw it more clearly now. Her routine had changed. It wasn't just the late nights anymore. It was the way she started spending weekends out of the house more often. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Sarah had always been someone who liked her space, liked to visit friends, even take off for a weekend trip now, and then to clear her mind. I didn't think much of it, but this time, it was different. She started getting dressed up more, wearing clothes she hadn't worn in years. It wasn't anything extravagant, just casual outfits that made her look effortlessly stylish. But I noticed the way she'd check her reflection in the mirror before leaving the house, smoothing down her hair, adjusting the hem of her skirt. It was subtle, but it was there. I remember the first time she came back late from one of these weekends away. It wasn't the first time, but something felt lost. I didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't volunteer the information. When she came to the door, she was quieter than usual, almost withdrawn. I made some excuse to leave the house and go to the shop, telling myself that I'd give her time. But the longer I spent away, the more the doubt festered. I couldn't stop wondering what she was doing when she was gone, who she was spending time with. There was something in her eyes that made me uneasy, something I had seen before, but never wanted to acknowledge. She was avoiding me, avoiding us. I remember one evening, sitting in the living room as Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the fading daylight. Her shoulders were tense, her posture stiff. She didn't notice I was watching her, and when she did finally turn around, her eyes met mine, but they were distant, cold, almost. I'd seen that look before, when she was hiding something. She wasn't hiding it from me on purpose, but more like she had already decided that I wasn't going to understand. It was a look I didn't know how to respond to. It's funny, isn't it? How you can spend years with someone and still not know them. That's what I started to feel. Like I didn't know Sarah anymore. I tried to talk to her, to fill that space between us, but she was always busy. There was always something else, someone else, it seemed. She'd get quiet when I asked questions, her responses short and unconvincing. The longer it went on, the more I started to suspect that there was more to her late nights and weekend trips than she was letting on. It was as if she was hiding a part of her life from me, a part one had no right to know. I'm not sure when I first thought of it, but the possibility started to gnaw at me, the idea that she was seeing someone else, a new person, someone I didn't know. The thought made my stomach turn, but it didn't go away. That's when I started to notice him. I didn't think much of it at first. I had seen him around, but never really paid attention. He was a truck driver, one of those men who passed through town on his long hauls, stopping at the gas station with a diner when he had a break. I had no reason to think he was anything more than a stranger. But then I saw him again, talking to Sarah. It was outside the grocery store. He was standing by his truck, leaning against it, and she was laughing. The genuine laugh, not the kind she gave me anymore, but the kind she used to give when she was excited. I didn't think anything of it at first. After all, he was just a guy passing through, right? But the way she interacted with him, the way she seemed so comfortable, it didn't sit right with me. There was something in her body language, in the way she looked at him, that made me feel like I was intruding on a moment that wasn't meant for me. I started to notice them more often. She'd mention him in passing, like it was no big deal. "Oh, I saw Mike today," she'd say, and I'd nod, trying to hide the fact that I was listening more closely than I ever had before. The conversations they had seemed innocent enough, nothing overly suspicious, but the way she spoke about him, it was different. She was interested in him, and it made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I should have confronted her. I should have asked her point blank what was going on, but I didn't. I couldn't. The idea that my wife might be seeing someone else, that she might have found someone who made her feel something I couldn't, it was too much for me to face. So, I watched. I watched the way she smiled at him when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she adjusted her hair when she was around him, the way she seemed to glow when she spoke about him. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it didn't mean anything, but deep down, I knew. I knew I was losing her, and that's when I started to feel it, this weight in my chest, this dread that had been slowly building. It was as though my worst fear was coming true, one little piece at a time. It was no longer a question of if something was happening. It was a question of when I would find out what it was. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to know. I knew, deep down, that something was wrong. I had been pretending, telling myself that I was just overthinking things, that it was nothing more than the strain of life, work, and the weight of routine. But the moment came like a punch to the gut, and I couldn't deny it any longer. It happened on a Saturday evening. Sarah had told me she was going to visit her sister in the next town over. It wasn't uncommon. She'd done it a few times before. A quick visit, usually lasting only a couple of hours. I never thought much of it. I stayed home, doing what I always did on weekends, fixing up a couple of cars at the shop, and then grabbing a quiet beer by myself in the garage. But that evening, I decided to drive into town. The quiet of the house had been too much, the isolation pressing in on me in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. As I drove past the diner, I saw her car, and next to it, his truck. I froze for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. I don't know why I didn't just turn around, why I didn't walk away and pretend I hadn't seen them. Maybe I wanted to confirm my suspicions, or maybe a part of me needed to see it with my own eyes, so I couldn't keep fooling myself. I parked across the street, out of view, and sat there for a moment. I watched as Sarah and Mike stood near his truck. They were laughing, talking, so familiar with one another, their bodies so close that it made my chest ache. Sarah's smile was wide, open, a smile she hadn't given me in months. I can see her laugh, hear it from where I sat, and something inside me twisted in response. Then, I sighed. Mike placed a hand on her arm, just a casual touch. But the way she didn't pull away, the way she let his fingers linger, it made my blood run cold. They stood there, their faces inches apart. Sarah's head tilted slightly to the side, and she looked up at him with that softness I hadn't seen in her in so long. Her body leaned in closer to him, just enough to tell me that she wasn't just talking to him, she was connected to him. The air around me seemed to thicken, and my heart pounded in my chest. I didn't want to watch. I didn't want to be a part of this. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. She wasn't my Sarah anymore. She was his. That's when he kissed her. It wasn't like the quick, almost accidental pecks we'd exchanged over the years. No, this was different. He cupped her face gently in his hands, and Sarah didn't pull away. She didn't hesitate. She leaned into him, her lips soft and willing against his. For a moment, it seemed to stretch on forever, and my heart felt like it was shattering right then and there. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was sit there in my truck, my hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle into my chest like a stone. They kissed like they were the only two people in the world. Her hands found their way to his chest, pulling him closer. I saw the way she touched him, familiar, gentle, the way I used to touch her. And then, she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her body against his, so close I could see the way she molded herself into him. It wasn't just a kiss. It was an embrace, a connection that had nothing to do with me. And in that moment, I realized I was a stranger to her. The jealousy, the anger, it swelled up inside me, but it was drowned out by something else. Something darker. A sense of helplessness. I could feel the room around me closing in. I wasn't just watching a woman kiss a man. I was watching my life fall apart, piece by piece. And it didn't stop there. She slid her hands down his chest, over his abdomen, and I knew exactly where they were going. I saw the way she pressed herself closer to him, her body responding to his touch. I watched as she pulled him towards the side of the truck, pressing him into the metal, and kissed him again, harder this time, with urgency. I could see her hands slip underneath his jacket, feeling him, touching him. Her fingers moved with a familiar rhythm, a rhythm that once belonged to me, but now belonged to him. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run to them, to pull her away from him, but I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. I wanted to lash out, to shout, to make her understand what she was doing to me, but I couldn't. Instead, I sat there, motionless, watching as she gave herself to him in the way she had once given herself to me, the way I had taken for granted. They didn't stop. She didn't stop. I could see them through the window now, so close, their bodies pressed together, their movements slow and deliberate. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I needed to see it. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. It wasn't until they broke apart that I could move again, but by then, it felt too late. I watched them, still stunned, as Sarah wiped her lips, straightened her clothes, and looked up at Mike with eyes that weren't mine. I didn't recognize the woman I saw standing there. I didn't recognize the woman who had laughed with me, who had kissed me like I was the only one who mattered, and I knew then that she was no longer mine. I sat in the truck for what felt like hours, my hands still gripping the wheel, my heart still beating in my chest like a war drum. The man I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, they had betrayed me. And in that silence, I realized that I had no choice but to face the reality of Sarah had chosen him. She had chosen him over me. I should have confronted them then and there, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition, started the engine, and drove away. The pain was too fresh, too raw, and I didn't know what I could do anymore. The house felt suffocating as I walked through the front door. The weight of everything that had just happened, the betrayal, the shattered trust, pressed down on me like an anchor, dragging me deeper into a pit I didn't know how to climb out of. I had seen her with it. The reality of it was inescapable, burning in my mind with each passing second. There was no denying it now. I had watched her, my wife, pressed against him, the way she had looked at him with a kind of longing that had never been directed at me. The kiss, the intimacy, the way she moved with, the way she belonged to him in that moment. It all hit me like a cold, brutal wave. She hadn't even tried to hide it from me. Her actions spoke volumes louder than any words could, and as much as I wanted to look away, to pretend it wasn't happening, I knew I couldn't. I had seen it all, and the truth was inescapable. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to make sense of the swirling chaos in my mind, but nothing made sense. How had it come to this? How had she, the woman I trusted with everything, allowed herself to slip away like that? The woman who had once held me in her arms, who had promised me a future together. How could she throw it all away for him? I didn't want to be here anymore. The walls of our home, our sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every inch of the house reminded me of what she had done. Every corner, every photograph, every quiet moment we had once shared felt like a lie. I needed to get away. I needed space, time to think, time to breathe. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. She came home that night, her presence hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. I heard her footsteps before she even entered the door, the sound of her shoes echoing through the empty hallway. She hadn't changed. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed. She simply looked empty, like she knew what I had seen and didn't care. The woman who had once been my world was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. She tried to talk to me, but I couldn't listen. Her words meant nothing anymore. They were hollow. What could she say that would make this right? What excuse could possibly explain the way she had given herself to? I could see the hesitation in her eyes as she approached me, but there was no warmth there, no love, just a dull reflection of the woman I once knew. And in that moment, I understood. I was nothing to her now. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. She had chosen him. She had chosen to betray everything we had built, everything we had worked for him. And there was nothing I could say or do to change that. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to make her feel the depth of the pain she had caused. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her with a cold, detached emptiness. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was broken. And the worst part was that I didn't think she cared. Not really. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't think straight. All I could do was replay what I had witnessed over and over in my mind, like a film on repeat. Her hands on him, her lips on his. The way they moved together, so at ease, so familiar, as if they had always been destined for one another. The thought gnawed at me, tearing at the remnants of what I had once believed. I watched her, day after day, trying to act as though nothing had changed. But I knew. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the shame, the distance. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo what had been done. It wasn't enough to repair the damage. I couldn't stay in this house anymore, not with her in it, not with the reminder of her betrayal hanging over me like a shadow. The emptiness between us was palpable, and I couldn't bear it. I started spending more time at the shop, retreating into the work I had always known. It was the only place that felt even remotely normal. But even then, the thoughts wouldn't stop. They kept coming, her and together. For touch, his touch. The life they had created was out me. And that's when I knew. It wasn't enough to walk away. It wasn't enough to just let her go. I needed more. She had taken everything from me, and now it was time to take something from her. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. Not now, not ever. I spent the next few days planning, quietly, carefully, making sure I didn't leave a trace. I knew what I had to do. I had to make her understand the cost of her actions. But I also had to make him understand. Mike needed to feel the same pain I felt, the same hollow emptiness that now consumed me. He would pay. They both would. The anger that had been building inside me now simmered beneath the surface, pushing me forward, driving me to act. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep playing She had chosen him over me, and now it was time for him to understand what it meant to take everything from someone. The plan had been simple, methodical. I had spent days watching, waiting, making sure everything was in place. I had to be sure, absolutely certain, that this would work. It wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It wasn't just about punishing Sarah for what she had done, for how she had thrown everything away without a second thought. No, it was about control. It was about taking back the power she had stolen from me and making her, and him, understand the weight of their betrayal. Mike had been an easy target. I knew his routine. I knew his truck, the hours he kept, the places he went. He had no idea what was coming, no idea that his life would end tonight. The night was quiet, almost eerily so, the kind of silence that wrapped around you like a suffocating blanket. The kind of silence that made your heartbeat feel like a drum echoing in the emptiness. I was ready. I was more than ready. I drove out to the outskirts of town, to the truck stop where I knew Mike would be. His truck was parked in the same spot it always was, under the dim glow of the streetlights. I parked my car a little further down, hidden in the shadows. My pulse was steady, but my mind was clear. There was no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. This was the only way. I sat there for a while, watching him. He was standing by his truck, talking to someone on the phone, completely unaware of the impending danger. The sight of him, this man who had taken so much from me, stirred something cold and dark within me. I hated him. I hated him with every fiber of my being. I couldn't help but remember the way Sarah had looked at him, the way she had touched him, the way she had belonged to him. That image burned in my mind, fueling the fire of rage that had been building inside me for days. As he ended the call and walked towards the cab of his truck, I made my moves. I moved swiftly, silently, making my way toward him. He didn't see me until it was too late. I grabbed him by the throat, slamming him into the side of the truck. His eyes widened in shock, his hands reaching out to fight me off. But it was futile. He was too slow, too unprepared. He didn't even have time to scream. I had him, and I wasn't letting go. In that moment, There was no doubt in my mind. There was no remorse. All I could feel was the weight of everything, the years of betrayal, the heartache, the brokenness, and it all came rushing to the surface. I watched as the life drained from his eyes, felt the last breath leave his body. There was no satisfaction in it. There was no relief. There was only the hollow emptiness that had consumed me for so long. The silence was deafening as I stood there, holding him in place, feeling his body go limp in my grasp. When it was over, I let him fall to the ground. His body hit the pavement with a dull thud, the sound of finality. I stood over him for a moment, staring down at the man who had stolen my wife, my life. And as I looked at him, I realized that it hadn't made me feel any better. It hadn't made the pain go away, but it had to be done. I turned and walked away, not looking back. The night swallowed me whole, and as I drove back home, I felt the weight of what I had done settle into my bones. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about the emptiness that came after, the coldness that took root in the pit of my stomach. And as I drove through the dark streets, the image of Sarah, her face, her touch, her betrayal, was all that remained. She would never know the price he had paid, the price I had made him pay. She would never know the darkness that had taken hold of me, that had led me to this point. But I didn't need her to know. I didn't need her to understand. I had taken everything from her, from him. And that was enough. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.